Joe Malloy is by any standards a small farmer working in adverse conditions. Cornamona landscape is breathtaking for the tourist, but the soil in this isolated part of Connemara is poor, hilly and hostile for those who farm the land. Joe is typical of many of the farmers he now represents as president of the Land League. Limited acreage and little prospects of improving their situation. The aim of the League is to ensure that small family farms are allowed to survive. Joe, why have you become involved in the Land League?
Because of what I see around me happening, like the injustices that I see all around me. They have awoken a social conscience within me, and that's why I am involved in the Land League.
Well, what exactly is happening in the hinterland of Connemara?
Well, what is happening in the hinterland of Connemara at the present moment is this. Wholesale purchase of land, and if a small farm comes on the market and there is a man close to that farm who badly needs land and maybe who has 5 or 6 in family and who hasn't got the purchasing power to purchase that bit of land, the day of the auction he can do nothing about purchasing it, even though he needs it to survive. But the rich can come in with the money, purchase it, and exploit the natural resource we have in scenery right around and make vast profits quickly. This is what's affecting us here.
But how can that be controlled other than by government law?
There has to be government legislation, and it has to be changed to take into consideration that 80% of all the farmers of this country are small farmers, and 60% of those would be part-time farmers. That would be farmers who would be living on the dole or who would have another job like myself and who could not live on a small farm.
But in reality, Joe, the facts are that your land at the moment can't support you and you do need a part-time job. Isn't that just the way things will go for the future?
Not necessary. I wouldn't agree with you at all there. If you look at Holland, a very small country, you have over 15 million people there living quite well. They have only a fraction of the resources that we have in land in this country. And if you look at them and you compare the lousy 3.5 million people that we have here in this country, and they're talking about recession day in, day out, I mean, you say the comparison is there.
Well, perhaps then what the Land League should be calling for is not more land, but better utilisation of the land you have.
Better utilisation of the land we have, and the compulsory acquisition of land and big estates from the very rich, who now are the core of power within the society that we are operating and living in this country, and who have all the wealth, and those are the fellas I mean that drives around in Mercedes and BMWs and Land Rovers and the big boys. They don't know anything at all about farming in the west of Ireland, and they don't just want to know anything about Connemara. And their whole outlook is to eliminate us and wipe us off the slate.
The modern Land League began in the 60s, led for 15 years by Dan McCarthy, the man who championed the cause of his fellow small farmers. The League has had close associations with trade unions, very often standing on the same platform with them. But land division and redistribution is the area of greatest concern for the Land League. Protest marches against foreign investors and speculators buying up land throughout the country were a feature of the League's activities in the 60s and 70s. Its association with land agitation and demonstrations in rural Ireland are likely to continue, if not increase, under its new president.
Well, its aims now will be continual agitation, but it will broaden its base to bring in the whole social thing right across the board. By that I mean the whole life of the people, and taking in other things like poverty and living conditions and so forth.
It would seem from what you're saying that you're moving into the realm of politics.
Well, up to a point, yes. I think that we have the same right to be involved politically as the big farming organisation, the IFA.
Do you feel that there's a division between yourselves and the IFA?
Most certainly so, because the IFA does not represent small farmers. The IFA represents the rancher and the big rich farmer.
Could you not, though, if you're interested in small farmers, work within the confines of the IFA to have something done to make some improvements?
No, I could not. No.
Why?
Because the IFA now is a big organisation. It is involved in exploration, hydrocarbon exploration, and it is involved in banking and in insurance, and it is involved in politics, and it is now a powerful farming core of power, and it does not recognise small farmers such as you have around here.
Had the Mansholt Plan of the late 60s been adopted, areas like Cornamona would no longer be the homes and property of small farmers. Agricultural policy in the 60s centred on the development of the medium to larger farms, those thought to be commercially viable, removing smaller farmers from the land and providing them with alternative occupations. The plan was never implemented to the full, and while in areas of the country farming has become more efficient and productive, farmers like Joe Malloy cannot depend on farming for their livelihood.
You have to have something else. If you haven't another job, or if you haven't the dole, what they call farmer's aid, to give it a nice term, but it is the dole, you can't exist.
How are people in this area affected by being small farmers, by only having 11 acres and over?
Well, I'll give you an example now. In this area, in the past 60 years, over 100 houses have been closed forever, and they had to move out, and the reasons being economic pressure, and the farms were not viable to live on.
What exactly can you do that is positive and constructive, that will hold the people here or indeed bring people back to the area?
Well, I think that what we need here is, if we haven't got the dole, we need industries to help them to have a job outside of farming, and if they make 20-30% of their livelihood on a farm, well, that's an asset to the nation as a whole, and it's not a burden on the exchequer. It's 30-40% or whatever they're making on it, less that they have to be paid. So that I think that instead of looking on small farmers as non-viable and non-entities, that they are an asset, because the human dimension has been removed, and that is what we have to bring back. We have to bring back the compassion for our fellow man, whether he lives on 5 acres in Connemara or in any other part of Ireland.